everyone, it's Miranda, and today's video is going to be all about why clinical psychology. For those of you who are a bit confused as to why I'm uploading on a Sunday instead of a Tuesday, well, I've changed my upload schedule, so surprise! But back to the video. So the inspiration for this came from the fact that my Facebook notifications are going absolutely bonkers this week, which can only mean one thing. The application deadline for the clinical psychology doctorate is looming. And I cast my mind back to how I was feeling when I was submitting my application for the doctorate, and it was very much a case of,
my head has absolutely gone. Why do I put myself through this?
And so I thought it might be nice to just create a video to reconnect with why we like clinical psychology and why the doctorate route is such a good one to pursue. So I hope it's useful for those of you who are applying and who are getting to that point of exasperation, or those of you who are still maybe just toying with the idea of dipping a toe into the clinical psychology world. So let's get straight into it. Okay, so what I'm going to start off with isn't at all romantic or altruistic, it's super practical, but it's really important. It's the fact that you get paid to train when you pursue the clinical psychology doctorate training path. So as a trainee, there's no cost to me to study, but I also receive a salary for the full 3 years, which is just, you know, it's fantastic to be able to be pursuing your passions and your interests while also developing your professional skills and everything else. I mean, it all just comes into this fantastic, tasty parcel of joy, and I'm so grateful for it. I think I really wanted to start off with this aspect over kind of the other considerations, because fundamentally the financial aspect is going to be a real blocker for a lot of people. There are doctorates which exist that are out there, like the Counselling doctorate, which are like equally impressive and rigorous and what have you, but the main difference is that you have to fund yourself through the full thing. And like, I would love to hear how people do it, because I remember at one point I was trying to crunch the numbers to see if that was a viable option for me, and it just was not adding up for me whatsoever. And I think, like, being completely honest, if funded options didn't exist, like I would be doing something else, like probably something outside of psychology. And I think, like, now that I'm on training, I'm all the more grateful for the fact that I don't need to think about kind of the financial aspect. Like, I don't need to be working other jobs on the side just so I can, like, make ends meet. All I need to do is focus on training, like focus on being the best trainee I can be. And also, like, kind of having that flexibility, it just makes me think of what, like, the great philosopher Gemma Collins once said.
But sometimes I do wish I had someone that was very financially stable that could look after me, so I can just be me, free. Yeah.
Oh, great woman. But I think, like, the point is, it's just that idea of having the freedom. When you know that your finances are covered, you can just free up headspace to think about other things. So yes, the course, but also maybe some other, like, life and personal goals that you have going. Like, I think looking at other trainees, I think it's fantastic that people are able to, like, be on training, decide to have a family or continue supporting their family, or like save up for something really important like buying a house. It's not like life has to stop and be on pause while we just focus on getting ourselves through training. I think kind of having that in mind, like, it really makes me so grateful, but it also makes me want to just, like, continue banging that drum of, like, we've got to just keep up the funding as much as we can, and it's so great that we're getting even more funded places, because it just means, like, more people can join the party. Another thing that I really like about the clinical psychology doctorate training pathway is that it very much keeps doors open. Like, you don't need to make any decisions in training about the sorts of people that you like to support or the kind of environments that you would like to work in. And that for me is just ideal. Like, when I think about my professional trajectory, I'm like,
what do you want?
It's not that simple.
What do you want? Damn it, what do you want?
even as I'm approaching that midway point of training, I still have no idea where I'd like to work after I qualify, let alone like my specialist placement. And that was very much the case before I started training. Like, I was an open book. And I think I really like that aspect of the doctorate, that you don't really have to commit to anything and you can very much try out different things to see if it suits you. Like, I think with all the other training paths, they do kind of ask you to specialize in some way. So whether that's kind of committing, getting really specialist in a particular like therapeutic modality, like you would as a high intensity CBT, or working with a particular group of people, like you would as a child and young people PWP, or working within a particular sector, like you might do if you were a health psychologist or an educational psychologist. Like, all of that is fantastic, and all of those routes are really interesting and exciting, but probably more so if you know what you want and you know the direction that you want to go in. And for someone who is still just like soaking it up, trying to make decisions, the clinical psychology doctorate just seemed like a really perfect fit. And I'm so thankful that I have actually gone down this route, because I feel like I'm surprised with each placement that I go on. So far I've done my child, my adult, and I'm now on a health placement working in ICU. And each environment has been so incredibly different, like just night and day. It's been such a shake-up, and it's been really different to anything that I've done before. And I've really taken like positive elements in every single placement. And I think without having kind of that opportunity to shop around in a way, I might have missed opportunities to find things that really, really interested me. And I'm actually looking forward to exploring that further. Like, as you will all know, in third year you get to pick a specialist placement, and there's so many exciting things that you can do. Like, you could work in forensics, you could work with a social enterprise, you could work with refugees, and I just think the opportunities are so endless, and I'm just so excited to explore things that I've never ever tried before. So leading very neatly on from this idea of keeping doors open is the fact that clinical psychology, the doctorate pathway, and the profession afterwards is super, super varied in terms of the kind of work that you can get involved in, which I feel is super interesting, because like I'm pretty sure that all my friends who are non-psychologists like very much think of me as a therapist, which is fine. I mean, it's not an argument that I'm going to get into every single time, but fundamentally
they're wrong.
Like, obviously clinical skills is a very core component of training and, you know, life afterwards as a psychologist, if you want it to be, but you're also trained to do so many other things. So that includes research, service development and improvement, like conducting audits, teaching, training, later on down the line doing like management, leadership, supervision. I feel like the list just goes on and on and on. And I think that's always been something that's like really, really attracted me to the clinical psychology doctorate pathway above all others, because like, for example, like I really like my clinical work, I really like working with individuals, but it's not like therapy is not something that I necessarily want to do day in and day out. And even though there might be kind of that temptation to think of yourself in the end as a jack of all trades, master of none, for me, that really suits me. I really like variety, and I really like kind of mucking in different projects, so that always seemed like the best fit for me. And I think it's also been super interesting working with different clinical psychologists as I kind of move from placement to placement, that they all look so different in terms of the work that they do. Like, I've worked with ones who are like very into kind of their clinical skills, are like super specialists in say like CBT and a couple of different modalities, and like it seems like anyone you put in front of them, they just manage to work with really, really well. And now, like, for example, I'm working with like a head of a psychology department, and he kind of like runs absolutely everything while keeping his clinical work going on the side as well. And then I've worked with people who are kind of much more into like service development and teaching and training, and I think it's just so interesting to see how people who are like qualified in the same way, like their working life can look so different. And that's really exciting to me, because especially that idea of like, you know, we're going to be working for a long time, like, you know, another 40 years. So it's kind of good to have more doors open to you and to know that you can kind of pursue lots of different routes across the scope of your professional career. So another thing that really attracted me to clinical psychology is the idea that, you know, we are trained and prepared to work with complexity. And that is definitely the thing that I find most interesting about therapeutic work. It's really the thing that drives me towards it, is the fact that you're able to support people who have been through an awful lot and helping them kind of make sense of their experiences so it doesn't all feel so overwhelming. And the training program is set up that everyone walks out being proficient in CBT, but you also have to have a secondary therapeutic modality, and sometimes even like a smattering of a third and fourth. So you've got all these different approaches that you've been kind of trained in, that you have a bit of a flavour of, and that means you can draw on each one with each individual case. So I think you can just like respond to things really flexibly and kind of pull on different kind of aspects of therapeutic approaches, so you can produce something that is really going to fit the individual. And actually in practice, I think it's really interesting, like so far on my placements, you can just see that like the more kind of complex cases, or the service users who have the more complex backgrounds, they always tend to be kicked up to the clinical psychologist. Like they kind of always end up on their wait list, which I think is really interesting. And personally, that is like absolutely where I would want to sit. That is kind of the work that I find most rewarding. So that just feels like another thing that has drawn me towards this profession above others. Okay, so I think the last thing that I'm going to touch on is just this idea that becoming a clinical psychologist just really gives you this amazing platform, I think, to do some really good stuff. And that's what we want to do all the time, do some really good stuff. But I think like part of what I mean is that once you go through your training and you qualify, you're already coming into quite a senior position within the NHS, which like only goes up if you've got aspirations to say like be head of a department or what have you. But I think also like people recognize what a clinical psychologist is. Like you've gone through a very rigorous training program, it's at doctoral level, and I think that commands a certain level of respect. I mean, I think people might disagree with that if they've been in the post for a long time, but like I just remember having a really clear memory of, as an AP, working with my supervisor, and we were at a looked after children kind of meeting like about one of the girls that we were supporting, and she was kind of like saying her piece in front of all these different professionals, and like everyone was really listening to her, like really listening to her. And it was almost kind of like confusing to me as an AP, because I think you're very much like sidelined before you've qualified to do anything. And it doesn't really feel like you've got much of a platform for your voice to be heard. And I think it's cool to have the opportunity to step into a role where you think that, you know, at least theoretically, you have the skills and you have the seniority to be able to kind of shape things so they are better for people. And, you know, like, I mean, I feel like it's a whole other conversation, like thinking about like, why is it that people in positions of power, like, get their voice heard? Like, that's a very deep and messy web. But I think it's really important for people who've got something good to say to make sure that they are sitting at the table where decisions are being made. And I really hope that that features in my future, which is why I'm very passionate about pursuing clinical psychology. Okay, I'm gonna wrap up this video for now. I feel like the sun has genuinely started to set since I started filming this video, which is just a tiny bit concerning. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed today's discussion, and if you have any other thoughts or opinions about why clinical psychology is the path for you, I'd be so interested to hear them. Love a bit of discussion, love a bit of back and forth. But until next week, take care of yourself and ciao for now. Hello everyone. Like me, like when I think about kind of long-term professional who are wondering why I'm uploading on a Tuesday. Until next week, take care of yourself and ciao for now.